The classic Fallout series ended with Fallout 2, a superb video game, a follow-up to one of the greatest RPGs ever made. After that we got Fallout Tactics, which tried to keep some of the aesthetic, some of the feel of Fallout, but mainly did its own thing, and it did it well enough. A true sequel, a Fallout 3, was something that the people at Black Isle had been itching to create for some time. But this was not to be. At the dawn of the new millennium, Interplay had been acquired by Titus Interactive. The company had struggled in the past couple of years, making outstanding, amazing, and thought-provoking video games, not really paying the bills in an age where everything was dominated by the PlayStation console, and the company's own attempt at creating a sports brand not really panning out. The acquisition was not what you would call the best possible thing to happen to Interplay, though it did stave off complete bankruptcy for a couple of years. Years in which the company managed to put out a couple of more games, like the very enjoyable Icewind Dale 2, which was made in some rush and permanently in crunch mode, as well as several titles that were meant to extend the library of games that the company had to the console market. So you got things like Fallout Brotherhood of Steel, a game that I have never played, and judging by the way that everybody's forgotten about it, for good reason. Fallout Brotherhood of Steel was not really all that Fallout. People who say that Fallout 3 isn't really representative of Fallout and claim that it's the worst of the series kind of gloss over this one because it was absolutely horrible, and I won't be talking about it much on account of, again, I have not played it. But I have seen it in action on numerous occasions. Sad occasions. Titus also tried its hand at creating console versions of the Baldur's Gate games in the form of the Dark Alliance series, which I have not played and have no opinion about. Black Isle was even working on a game called The Black Hound, which was the direct sequel to Baldur's Gate 2 until they lost the license to the D&D universe, and were even making a game called Torn, which was a sort of fantasy-style RPG made with a special system, but with 3D graphics and not 2D like Lionheart Legacy of the Crusader, which I covered in a previous show. And sometime around then began the development of a true sequel to Fallout 2. It was to be called, what else? Fallout 3. But we would know it best under the name Project Van Buren. That name would live long in the hearts of Fallout fans for many years, up until a playable version of it was released somewhere around 2007 and gave us a glimpse of the technical aspects of the game. It was a short demonstration that just involved you running around a small city and headed towards a bunker. Van Buren wasn't Black Isle's only attempt to bring back Fallout, but it was the one that got the furthest along in development. According to legend, the game was 99% done, and somewhere there's a laptop with a nearly complete build of the game that's just waiting to be leaked and show everybody what Fallout 3 could have been. The reality is it had over a year left in its development cycle. When you consider that Fallout New Vegas was also made in a little over a year, you can pretty much understand the game was not near completion. So those hoping for a leak sometime still hope in vain. The majority of the information we have about this game doesn't come from the tech demo itself because it's very short and not really all that eloquent about the game itself. It does, however, show us that some important changes were being considered for the skill system, such as switching out the simple speech skill for one that's a bit more nuanced with deception and persuasion, and of course the not all that adored crunching together of combat skills into just firearms instead of big guns, small guns, and energy weapons. No, most of the information we have come from the design documents of the game itself. You have dozens of files written by the likes of Chris Avalon and Josh Sawyer that detail everything you would ever want to know about this game. You've got character information, you've got map information, you've got story information, you've got tiny details about everything that was to be built, but was never actually finished. Perhaps it's this design document that gives people the impression that the game was almost done, on account of it being very comprehensive and very long. I mean, it was the framework upon which the entire game was supposed to be constructed, so it makes sense that everything would be in there. And very much in the style of Black Isle games, the ideas of it, the way the game flowed, was designed in part with the assistance of a campaign, like a role-playing game campaign that was played among the staff. That's why games like these tend to have a more lived-in feeling to them, like they weren't just made, they were built from something complex, something that involved people, their reaction, their emotion, their involvement, something that isn't just a simple video game. Not that a video game is simple, but you get the idea. There's a certain nuance that can be brought about through playtesting ideas in a different scenario than in a game engine. Van Buren would tell the story of a character called the Prisoner, because he would, ironically, start in a prison, which, as we know, is kind of the standard default start of any Elder Scrolls game. Here you would have again the opportunity to visit the Wasteland, now extended, expanded, and advanced another couple of years. You'd actually get to see the fallout, if you will, of everything that happened before. What happens when the Brotherhood of Steel, the original one that wasn't all that keen on sharing technology with other people, comes into conflict with a new rising power that aimed to bring everything around it to order. The new California Republic, the one that your character basically helped build by saving Shady Sands, or at least saving Tandy back in the day, and again aided in Fallout 2. But most of all, you got the chance to again shape the fate of this world. This time in a bit of a different way, because the enemy you were fighting was represented by scientists. Well, one main scientist that woke up from cryosleep and was basically going to nuke the entire world, but depending on what you did, depending on what you showed him about this world, some areas may be spared. Not all of them, but some would. It aimed to improve in many ways upon the core ideas of Fallout. For example, I told you about the way that speech was split up into deception and persuasion. Well, it got even deeper than that, because now you weren't just given the option that would defuse the situation instantly. You would be more reliant on learning about the character and then guiding them towards a path that you would want them to take. It would be a bit more indirect, a bit more like probably the closest thing I can imagine would be the conversation system from Deus Ex Human Revolution, where you have to know some things about certain characters to actually get them to respond to what you're saying. And because this was a game being made by Titus, it was gonna have multiplayer and a real-time combat component. Now, the real-time combat component, that could have worked. It sort of worked in Fallout Tactics. It could have worked here. I mean, the demo itself does not actually have turn-based mode. It only has the real-time mode, and well, it's clunky and not all that great, but it would be possible. We've seen it in Lionheart, and if Lionheart were a tad bit slower, it would have been amazing. So the system could have functioned. The multiplayer component, however, is always going to be a bit tricky. This was many years before games like Divinity Original Sin and its sequel that proved how you can actually do a narrative-focused multiplayer RPG right. Could it have been done just as well in Van Buren? I have no idea. I'm not sure if the game got that far along in development, because, as I've said, it was cancelled. Here you see Titus, even though it invested many millions of dollars into Interplay, had certain financial problems and decided to hedge its bets on things that seemed a bit more capable of getting them some good returns on their investments, like Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance 2, Fallout Brotherhood of Steel, and Lionheart Legacy of the Crusader, for which they did not actually pay the developers money and time. Needless to say, it did not end well. But Van Buren didn't actually go completely to waste. Obsidian Entertainment, a company founded by the people that used to work at Black Isle, received the task of creating Fallout New Vegas. They only had 18 months to make the game. That is not enough time to make a game. Thankfully, Luckily, they had already made a whole lot of work on a Fallout game before this, and they were free to use all that design work to actually build a proper Fallout game using the technology that was provided to them by Bethesda. New Vegas isn't a complete vision of what Van Buren used to be, of what Fallout 3 was to be, but it is the closest thing that we have to it. It manages to capture some of the old Fallout magic again by bringing the action back into the Nevada desert with characters we used to know, with the factions we used to know and how we used to know them, like the Brotherhood of Steel, the NCR, and some newcomers as well. It makes for a very interesting game. I'll not make a separate video about it though, at least not yet, on account of it being able to stand on its own 2 feet and pretty much explain what it is about quite easily. But I felt that the older games needed a helping hand, on account of them being ignored right now as much as the Shadowrun games that are being covered in separate videos by our friend Steven Nonsense on his channel. But that does leave us with 1 week left in Fallout September, or Fall Fallout, or the 20th anniversary of Fallout, because that is what this is celebrating. And in that last week I will cover Fallout 3, which is a game that was immensely popular, so it probably doesn't need me to speak for it, but it is a game that must be talked about as a pivotal point in the history of Fallout. So I'm gonna see you again next week when we're gonna talk about Fallout 3. Also pretty much every other day because we have constant shows. Goodbye.